That's the only other thing that I had in that subject.
Okay, thanks, Bob. All right, so rules of procedure for police appointments. So Falco has kindly revised our 137.05 Rule 2 of the town ordinance, which was attached along with the agenda today. There's two types of changes in that ordinance. The first type of change, let me just pull that up, hold on. So the first is in the first and second page, and those were some of the changes that we had discussed. I don't think it was at the June meeting. I think it might have been like April, May timeframe. So for instance, we wanted the police officer, this is for incoming police officers, new officers that we would be hiring. We wanted the officers to be at least 21 years of age. Excuse me, we had a slight change to the background. We wanted them to have either an associate's degree or 4 years of military service with at least 2 years of law enforcement experience. Sorry, I started diving into details. So there's two types of changes. The first change is changes that we recommended as a result of our conversations. The second change is to comply with Act 57, which I'll admit I don't know a ton about. I did look at it, but that's what Falco has incorporated into the ordinance. It basically applies to background investigation and reporting as to what we find in a candidate's background investigation for officers that have applied to the town of McCandless. So the next steps would be, assuming you've looked at this, you agree with it. I guess we would probably ratify it at this for this personnel board, and then we would send it on to council to approve and sign into the records, basically. So that would apply to the personnel board and for the town of McCandless going forward. And like I said, the vast majority of the changes here that are bolded are relevant to Act 57. Has anyone had a chance to look? Well, let me ask differently. Has everyone had a chance to look at that attachment? I see some heads nodding. Okay, any questions, comments, things that you would like to have changed?
I had a question. Oh, go ahead. There was somebody else who spoke. I didn't want to interrupt anybody. Go ahead.
Floor is yours, Brian.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, sure. I just wanted to ask a question about something I thought I would see, but I didn't. And it was basically some reference to consideration of public statements and specifically social media. Is there any prohibitions against including that, or do people have feelings about that one way or the other?
Say more about. So we took the previous ordinance and we tweaked it. We didn't add any substantive kind of sections. It sounds like that might be like I don't know, but I'd like to hear more about what your thoughts are, but it sounds like that might be like adding a chunk.
Yeah, so it would be basically saying, if there was some social media stuff that came to light in the process of, examining the person, their candidacy, that if we have it in the ordinance, it would be possible to consider that. And if we didn't have it in the ordinance, it would be potentially, it wouldn't be a justifiable reason to make a personnel decision if it wasn't in the ordinance, basically.
I think that's actually something, I'm sorry, Amy.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm scrolling through. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, that's actually something that's usually done in the background investigation that's conducted by the department. The thorough investigation, talking to the neighbors, stuff like that, that would also include social media. Some departments even request passwords be turned over so that the department in the process of doing the background check can look and see what there is. And that would be a place where a disqualification would occur.
Right. I was just worried if we didn't have it explicitly in the ordinance, it would potentially be because I didn't see it, as a thing that was highlighted or uncovered. And I just wanted to, I agree. I think that's an important thing, as the world has become, in social media. And It just seemed like it would be, if I was somebody who had been bounced because of concerns about social media and I didn't see it in the ordinance, I would worry that that would be something that somebody could say, oh, no, I'm filing a complaint because it's not in the ordinance explicitly.
Falco, do you have anything to add to his comment?
Yeah, I think that's a valid issue. I do agree, and I'm on my phone, so I can't see who made the comment that that is part of the background investigation and normally would be considered as part of that and the results of the background investigation. My concern with specifically calling out something like social media is, you know, if we then don't list something else that comes to light through the background investigation, are we prohibited from considering that as well? So I think it's better in that sense to keep it more open so that the background investigation can encompass anything that the chief is able to determine from that investigation and provide that information to the board. So
Okay, so keep it high level
appreciate-
and everything else is assumed to be included, even if we don't say it explicitly. Okay, that's fine.
Correct. Yeah, I wouldn't want to get into the situation again where we have to list specific things and then something else comes to light and it's not part of that list and so it can't be considered.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's better.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Brian. I did notice too, when I first looked at this, one of the qualifications, F in section under 202 says be of good moral character. And I thought, wow, that's really broad. How do we define that? But that's part of what, you know, enables us to look at things that might come up during the background investigation or during interviews or during any other part of the process and say, do we think this individual is of good moral character? So
Right.
to me, that was another sort of catch-all category. Okay, other questions or comments on the revised ordinance? Okay, do I have a motion to approve that?
Yes, I motion to approve it.
Matt Shipley, is there a second?
Second.
Brian, all in favor, aye.
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 All opposed? I hear no opposition, so let's go ahead and I don't know, Nick, I guess the next step would be for you, well, it has Bob's signature required, so I guess the next step would be for Bob to sign, to take it to council and do whatever they need to do to approve it.
We'll take it and go through that approval process.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, back to the agenda. Okay, so Citizens Police Academy and National Night Out. Nick, it sounds like Chief Hawk gave you some items to update us on.
Yes, let me see if I can pull up this, what exactly he said. Yeah, he said, we had a very successful event at National Night Out, as many of our citizens of our community attended, and there were several vendors, which overall made for a great event. We have some ideas on how to build off this event for next year and plan on continuing the event in the coming years. For Citizens Police Academy, he says, our Citizens Police Academy had its first meeting on Thursday, September 16th, and we have 17 citizens participating in the academy thus far. And he said, you know, thank you to everyone who has been involved with both of these events thus far. So,
Okay, great.
if anyone has anything to add or suggestions or anything about that that I can relay back to the chief, I'm happy to do that.
Well, I know I attended the National Night Out. I was very impressed. There was a lot of vendors, there was a lot of citizens. I think there might have even been more citizens than at the McCandless Community Day, which was surprising. It was great weather. It was really just nice to see people out interacting with the police and other members of our fire departments and the ambulance and all the vehicles and the kid, there were a bunch of kids there. So I thought it was very well done, and it'll be great to hear Chief Hawk's ideas for how to build on it going forward.
Great.
All right. Any questions, comments on item 5?
Yes, did Chief Hawk give any feedback on the Citizens Police Academy?
No, not as of yet. Not as of yet. That's really all that he shared with me.
Well, there's-
I personally was not there. I don't know, Bob, if you were back on Thursday.
there are 2 cadets on the call. We
Yeah, I
get
thought it
some
was great. I
feedback.
really did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic.
I was
and
going to
talk-
say, no, I asked, sorry.
Go ahead, Carolyn, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I asked Ryan, I made a survey up, so I dropped that off the station and had them edit and hand it out. So I know they collected a survey at the end, and I'm sure they're just like compiling, whatever answers they got back from that, but they are going to hand out a survey after each evening. That way no one forgets if they have any ideas or suggestions. It's fresh in their mind rather than waiting till the end of the program. So I'm sure the next time we have our personnel board meeting, we can have, whatever the surveys we've gone back, Ryan can share them with us then.
Yeah, thanks,
Great.
Carolyn. I think that's a great idea, because by the time we get to the end of October, we will have forgotten what we did in mid-September, I'm sure. And Matt,
Exactly.
Matt, I can just read you a couple of highlights from the curriculum, just so you're kind of aware what is being covered. So last week was history and opening remarks, introductions, history and structure of McCandless Police Department, tour of the station and patrol vehicles. This week is criminal procedure, crimes code, probable cause, a review of the court system, and an anatomy of an arrest. Thursday, September 30th, we have a K9 presentation, an SRT, which is our equivalent of SWAT type presentation, and a presentation by the school resource officers. On October 7th, overview of traffic enforcement, should be fascinating. A DUI and standard field sobriety test demo, mock traffic stops, and crash investigation overview. On October 14th, crime scene investigation and crime scene processing, as well as case law. On Thursday, October 21st, field trip to the 911 center. October 28th, CPR certification, and November 4th, SimTac training, which I believe to be somewhat of like a virtual reality type thing, although I've never done that before.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a scenario-driven virtual reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had that at the FBI Citizens Academy, and it was awesome.
Yep. So sounds like a real interesting agenda. Looking forward to the rest of the workshops or classes or whatever we want to call them. So. All right. We're just looking today. Police officer exam details is the next item. So eventually we will be selecting new officers for hire, because we sorely need more officers in the town of McCandless. We have for quite some time. Even when we started, gosh, it feels like forever ago, but we've had a lot of turnover in the board and starts and stops with this process, and other things like the sergeant promotions taking our time. So that is our next order of business as a board, is to get clear on the officer exam process. And do we want to make any changes to that process? Do we want to proceed as it was done in the past? So I need to dig out, like I said, it's been a while since we discussed this, but I will dig out. I think we had, I had written up at one point, kind of here's the steps that we took and the order we took them in, and we'll send that around so we can maybe discuss that at our next meeting, which I'll come back for comments and questions on item 6. But just before I forget, our next meeting, are we all good doing this monthly? I think we need to get kind of a regular cadence here so that we can make some progress. And maybe if we meet monthly, we won't lose as much momentum between meetings and the meetings can be kept shorter. How does everyone feel about a monthly meeting cadence?
I thought that's what we usually did, although it
Yeah.
hasn't always worked out that.
Specifically, Amy, I was going to suggest, during this sort of day of the month, if we will,
Yes.
going forward, the third Wednesday of each month at 9:30 a.m. So
That sounds perfect, Nick.
for our next one at October 20th, November 17th, and one in December for December 15th. So,
Okay.
and that'll
Perfect, thank you.
save us from, annoying emails from me with doodle polls and everything else and all the back and forth.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for your help with scheduling, Nick. So Matt, I think we were trying to meet monthly, but with all the scheduling back and forth, it was more like every other month. What is it, September now? And our last formal board meeting was in June. So it's been 3 months this time. So I think that'll help, a third Wednesday of every month. If everyone blocks their calendars now, hopefully we can have most or all of the regular and alternate members in attendance, as well as our honorary members, Nick and Bob and Carolyn and Falco. So,
Chief Hawk.
and I should have done this at the beginning. Brian, do you know who Falco is? Do you know Carolyn? Should we do introductions?
I know Carolyn. I know. I mean, so that's what I know Bob too. But yeah, introductions would be helpful.
Okay, well, I can start and just sort of tell you kind of how the board works. So there's 3 regular members. That would be me, Matt Shipley, and now you. 2 alternates. That would be Matt Lucas and Mark Laporte. And then Bob, obviously the town manager. You know him already. Carolyn Schweiger is our ward. Can't remember what ward. Ward 2, Carolyn?
6.
6. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Ward,
six.
Ward 6 council member, but more importantly, for purposes of this board, she is our liaison to the council for the personnel board. So she joins our meetings when and if she can. Nick works for the town. He helps us in all sorts of ways, putting together the agenda, scheduling, following through on lots of things. I'm probably understating your role, Nick, but so that's kind of the makeup. We can maybe, I don't know, should we go around and do a broader introduction, or is that sufficient, you think?
I think that's sufficient.
Okay. Any follow-up questions there, Brian, or?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay, so, all right, sorry. We were on item number 6, police officer exam details. So I will attempt to find the write-up, just kind of by way of history, especially for Brian's purposes. There had not in the past been a lot documented from this board. It was all sort of institutional knowledge. The same 3 members did this for like 15 or 20 years. I may be exaggerating, but not by a lot. So we're trying as we go to document things and save those so that, as we have more, as we do more and add more and change things, we're not kind of losing out on that progress by not having it in writing. But, that takes time and we're all volunteers, so. All right, so anything else to add? The police officer exam details. Again, I don't know that we're ready to kind of jump into that today, but in thinking back to previous conversations, anything that you guys wanted to bring up, like, oh, make sure you send this, or make sure we talk about this in the next meeting? Anything in particular?
As I remember, we were still debating whether we should conduct the physical examination first, or where in the process we should put that, but we can discuss that next meeting.
Got it, okay. So
Matt, you're referring to the physical agility testing and not a physical itself, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I'm not talking about getting a medical doctor involved.
Right.
Yeah. We also had, now that I'm thinking back, we had a discussion around lie detector tests doing, right? Didn't we? Does that sound familiar to anyone? Doing a
The polygraph.
polygraph. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. Yeah. Does anyone remember where we landed on that? I can go back and look at the minutes, but
I don't remember.
I know in past discussion, we don't have the capabilities of doing it in our town. I know there's one police officer in Ross who's certified to do that. But that's kind of all that I remember right now.
yeah. Okay.
What questions were people trying to get answered under lie detector?
I
don't know
remember
that-
drug usage was one of them.
Yeah, I don't remember specifics on that, Brian. Sorry. I think it was more like, here's what some other departments do. Should we consider doing this as well? Matt Lucas, does Bellevue use polygraphs?
When we use them, we also use Ross Township's officer. And we don't dictate the questions. He has a stock test that he gives, and then he gives a report back on what the results were
Are they used for selecting new officers?
for new hires, not for promotions, but for new hires.
Oh, interesting. Are you able to get more information about what kinds of questions they're asking or the pass-fail rate or any of that?
I can ask. I don't know that there's a pass-fail rate as opposed to whether there was deception or not. And a deception would be an issue, but I'll see what information I can get. I know we haven't always used polygraphs, and it seems to be a discussion that goes back and forth for us as well. But currently, I believe we are using them, and I will see what I can get.
Okay, thanks. I think the discussion was more, as I recall, hey, other people are doing this. This is something we should consider. If yes, why? If no, why not? You know, just trying to be open. It was, like I said, the group had done things the same way for a very long time. And so we're trying to look at this with fresh eyes and just be open to making recommendations to make the process better. Any other components of police officer exams that we should maybe be prepared to discuss next month?
Amy, the only other thing that I could remember in looking at this, right now, the written test counts for 60% of the score. Oral is 40%. Whether you wanted to make any adjustments with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that if we discussed that, I don't recall discussing it, but having just done the sergeant promotional exams, I did find the weighting of 70-30 to be too heavily weighted towards the written. 60-40 is a little bit better, but what are other people's thoughts around the weighting for new officer selections?
Well, I think that the process is difficult to measure somebody's oral examination and put a score to it that's consistent across candidates. I don't know that we should even consider 30, 40, whatever, putting some kind of number to it. Really, it comes down to ranking them. And we should have some kind of justification in ranking them. That's not like, well, I like this person or not like this person, but certainly rank them according to merit that we see in their examinations. That way we get away from putting scores down that it's difficult. It's difficult to be consistent and measure, well, did this person, it's not like you're examining a test and they got this question right and that one wrong. No, it's something that more is just an essence instead of a measurable quantity.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. It leads me to think, what if the interview committee did a ranking and assigned, the top candidate gets 100 points, the next one gets 95, the next one 8, or some some variation of that versus a raw score that, to your point, is wholly, or at least partially subjective, because it is really difficult to subjectively rate one candidate against the other.
Yes, it is.
Objectively, I guess is what I meant.
And what I would suggest then, Nick, if we can send out section, I guess it's rule 208 that talks about what the passing scores are for written and oral, and then what the weighting that's applied to written and oral, so that the board has that information and they can sort of absorb that. Because I think, and also we need to send that to Falco, but to go the route that you guys are talking about, I think there would have to be some amendment to that section of the ordinance too.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah, that's true.
So
I'll make
from-
sure that I get that from, you, Bob, or someone, and we send that out in advance of next month's meeting.
Yeah, it's in the code. And I can show you where.
Thank you.
And
And I
is
guess
it,
the
sorry,
other thing to consider in all of this is if you want to make any changes there, that would be subject to ordinance as well. So we would need to work accordingly with that.
yeah,
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the percentage to me means the relative importance that we and the council and the citizens place on the communication aspect of things and the knowledge aspect of things. And for me, I think communication is one of, if not the most important thing for these folks. And it's important to understand, the person's explicit answers to explicit questions. And the oral part seems to reflect more the ability to extract these subtleties and communicate effectively. And so I would also suggest that we increase the percentage of the oral component relative to the written component. And on the discussion about the way that the oral component score is generated, that's a tough one. It really is. I agree. And it's inherently subjective. I agree. And the problem is that there are going to be candidate pools that are very different each time. So, there might be a bunch that are really good at communication, and then there might be some where there's like a few really good communicators and some that are really bad. And then there might be a group where they're all really bad. So I'd be hesitant to, set it in stone as far as like a ranking system, which person got which scores. And it's almost like the discussion about the social media involvement, just saying, hey, communication is important. There's a calculation of how we figure that in. And I think it's understood to be inherently subjective. And at least my impression, and I don't know how this review process goes, but if I said the person was a 3 or a 7, that's it. Like that there's really no challenging that. I mean, that's my assessment. And I agree that might differ, but my 3 might not be the same as Matt's 3 and might not be the same as Amy's 3, but that's part of it, right? I mean, that's kind of the point. So I think it's okay for it to be subjective. And I think that's the intent.
yeah. Having lived through the sergeant's promotional exam, I would almost have said, I think I did suggest, and I'll say it again because I still feel that way, like a 60-40 for that process, if not even a 50-50, because the interview process really gets to those subtleties. It's not just what you know, it's how you can communicate. And I agree with you there, Brian. For selecting new officers, you know, a lot of these officers have prior experience. Some of them might be just fresh from the academy, but even still, I think maybe knowledge is a little bit more important at the officer level. So I think the way it stands now with a 60-40, I'm okay with that for new officers. But I don't know, what do other people think? And sorry, before I ask that, I wanted to ask Matt Lucas, do you have experience with a new officer's exam? Because I think we thought for the sergeant's exam that it was very difficult and a certain percentage of the officers taking that promotional exam would not pass, and yet they all passed. So is the new hire exam more or less difficult in your opinion, about the same? Like what kind of rate can we expect?
Yeah. My experience with the new is it's a different level. A sergeant's exam is a much higher level. It's a much deeper test because of the information you're trying to get, where an entry level police exam is exactly that. It's an entry level. And if you review the written exam, a lot of the written exams are reading comprehension, common sense, logic, stuff like that. And when you get into the oral interview, like Brian was saying, you are looking for how they represent themselves, how they communicate, but it's still a basic or a more basic level. So they're actually, I would say, easier to score and easier to compare because it's now apples to apples.
Mm. So what's your thought on the relative weighting then?
60-40 is okay. We do 70-30. If somebody excels at a written, then they have that base knowledge and can, read and, write and represent themselves well in written and deal with that stress well as far as taking that written competition. But then they do have to represent in communication and how they present themselves. So I don't think 60-40 is unreasonable. If I would go either way with it, I would push more towards a 70-30 if it moved at all.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. What about you, Matt Shipley?
Yeah, and my point is that let's just take, if you have multiple officers over several days time frame, you come into a process where you're grading one way one day. How are you going to maintain your consistency across this 3 days of that? Because you grow in knowledge and experience and understanding of the questions that you're asking, because they're consistent across the board. But so are you giving the fair shake to the guys at the beginning or the end or in the middle? You just want to make sure. That's why I say, yeah, you're going to have to grade people according to some kind of subjective scale, as Brian suggested, and nobody could argue with that. The problem is that adding that up and giving that as a score and then taking it as a factor in a 30-70 or 60-40 split becomes an issue. My point is that get rid of the 70-30, get rid of the 60-40, have exam scores, and then have a ranking system where everybody writes down what their score is, but they come up with, hey, this is my top candidate, this is my second top candidate, 1 through whatever it is. And that way, then you can use the consensus building tool to create a consensus among the board members of who their top candidate is, the second top candidate, third, and so forth as they rank. And then you can submit that to the town council or to whomever and say, here are the test scores and here are our ranking. This is our recommendation. Then you can decide based on our recommendation. And of course, we could add not just the recommendation, but of 1, 2, 3, but why we chose those individuals. And then the council can make a decision who they would like to hire based on all the information available.
Okay, thanks. Mark, any thoughts?
Mark, I think, left the meeting. He did indicate, I'm not sure if it was a 10 or 10:15 that he kind of had a hard stop for today.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought but those are Carolyn and Falco. Okay, got it. All right, so.
And I'm not sure, Amy, if I may, if it's relevant, I was just kind of looking some things up here. And I think this was the first personnel board that I was here for back on March 23rd, perhaps, that we had a discussion with this, at least how it pertained to the sergeant's exam, which I know is different from this, but the group at the time seemed to believe that 50-50 was the most appropriate mix. And at least I have here in my notes that was the recommendation that they were going to make to council for that, just if that's historically
Yeah.
relevant at all for that exam.
Yeah, in hindsight, I wish we had done that.
Yeah.
It like I've already said, and not to repeat myself, but I think the oral interview portion is even more important for sergeant selection than it is for new officer selection. But that's my perspective. I recognize there are other perspectives, and I think in the end we decided that the speediness of the process was more important than trying to change the ordinance and go back, and we never lived through it before, so we didn't really, we had hypotheses about how it would go or what would be important, but we also didn't think all 8 of them would pass the written exam because we were told how difficult it was. So it's all a learning curve for us. We're all new at this. We've never done any of this before, but yeah, I do remember discussing that. Thanks for bringing that up, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to just point out one thing. I know this is, easily 3 years ago when we had a new hire interview for council, we had an individual who was literally sweating when we were interviewing him to the point where we had to offer like wet rags, drenched. So I understand the questioning of the weighting of it. And I think, 60-40 seems more fair, 50-50 from just council standpoint. Cause I remember he answered everything wonderfully, but he was nervous as anything, but council saw past that. So if that kind of gives you just a little tidbit from like standpoint of town council, I understand it's a stressful process, and sometimes they're written. I kind of think they should be more equal. Obviously, communication is highly important, and I think it is on both levels, whether new hire or sergeants. But just wanted to share that tidbit with you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to kind of echo some of that, I agree that the communication is really important for the sergeant from a leadership perspective. And it seems like it's important for a different audience for an officer, because they're dealing with the public and communicating with the public. And I think it's just, still, I'd say 50-50 for both, from if I was just going to throw something out. And at the same time, I understand Matt's perspective on why don't we just scrap these percentages and make the whole thing, subjective to, the combination of the factors that we view, in combination as an applicant pool. I'm not sure how that would work operationally, and I'm interested in that. I mean, because ultimately I think that's advantageous to make it, discretionary. It's inherently discretionary when you do that. And I'm just curious, a little more details on how that would work. Because the sort of like, you make a score, it gets added up, it becomes a percentage, and then it adds the other thing. Like, that's at least a lot more simple, I would say. And I just want to make sure we wouldn't be putting ourselves at risk from a process perspective. But I am open to that, I would say.
Yeah, I think on paper, it's simpler to have those two things combined together, but operationally, having tried to do that, it's not that simple. So it's, yeah, I could see both. It's interesting. I'd like to talk more about Matt's idea. I like the idea of ranking. What I'm questioning, though, is then you have 2 data points, right? You have the written exam, which is a score from 0 to 100, and then you have the ranking. And if the 2 don't match, now you're basically saying to council, here's our perspective, regardless of the written score. Here's how we rank them in the oral interviews. Now you guys as council have to reconcile that and determine who you want to move forward with.
Well, I hate to try to quote somebody else's idea, but I think Matt was saying that we were including the written exam in our ranking, and it was the overall ranking, considering both the interview and the score.
Oh,
Is that correct, Matt?
Yes, I mean, that should be part of any ranking that you would do, but you know, you're taking all, at oral interview, you're taking all factors into consideration of who this person is, because you, at the end of the day, anybody could study well an exam. That doesn't make him a great leader or make him a great police officer. So I've seen
Right.
that forever in my career, is that people who score well, they don't always make the best person to be in charge or whatever. So that's not where, I don't think that we want to put too much weight or emphasis on that. It's important that people know their subject matter, but that does, you know, past that doesn't mean they're going to do good at the job.
yeah.
But you could do what Amy suggested at the beginning, is that you take the written exam scores and then we rank the people according to their, you know, 1 through whatever, and then we the top guy gets 100%, second guy gets 95, third guy gets 90, and you know, whatever, and so on and so forth. And then we add that into the calculator and see where everything falls out. You know, that I think that would be better than for each of us trying to make a determination like, oh, this person got a 85 and that person got an 84, that type of stuff. Because you're splitting
This
hairs.
is Falco.
What hairs can you split?
I'm sorry to interrupt. This discussion definitely ties into the changes that are being proposed to the ordinance, because there is a very detailed process for the entry-level examination, actually even a little more detailed than it is for the promotional examination. And I'm looking right now at section 208 of the ordinance regarding the list of eligibles, which is kind of in line with what you're discussing right now. And it spells out specifically how that list is to be prepared in relation to both the written and oral examinations, and then creating the list of eligibles in a certain order, and then providing that to council, who can then make selections as to who to interview from that list of eligibles. So if you're anticipating making any revisions to that process, we would have to include that in another round of proposed changes to present to town council before you began the process of the entry-level examinations. If your intention is that it would apply to the examination, hopefully that would be scheduled in the near future.
Yeah, understood. Thanks, Falco. Yeah, there's even minimum passing scores of 85% on the written examination and 80% on the oral examination, which is different from what we encountered with the sergeant's promotional process. The list shall be prepared in descending numerical order. Yeah, it is quite detailed. So I can send this out, or maybe Nick, you were going to. We should all take a look at this. And I think this is great conversation. Maybe come to the next meeting kind of just prepared to, how would you, if you had to actually change the verbiage in the ordinance, what would you recommend? And we can have that discussion and give us some time to kind of think through how that process would look. Because I think we're trying to balance the inherent subjectivity of the interviews with the need for things to be very transparent, very prescriptive in terms of the ordinance, so that everyone understands what the process is and how the process will be carried out. So,
And I went ahead and just sent that out. I was looking for it
Okay.
online.
thanks, Bob.
Was this easy enough for me to download and then send to you all? So you should all have it.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I know we're trying to keep these meetings to an hour. People have work and other commitments. So seeing that we have 5 minutes left, any other business for this board to discuss? Okay, I don't hear any. Do we have any public on this meeting, Nick?
Not that I can see, no.
Okay, so we don't have to do any public comments. You gave us the dates for the next meeting, which is October 20th, also the third Wednesday of the month. So everyone mark your calendars for that, November 17th and December 15th. 9:30 to 10:30. Hopefully we can, like I said, meet more regularly, keep it to an hour. I have a follow-up item to send out some of the conversation and perhaps decisions we have made around the procedures for selecting new officers. Matt Lucas is going to try to get more information regarding the process for selecting new officers in Bellevue, in particular the polygraph usage, if they're willing to share. Anything I missed? Okay, Bob, anything you wanted to discuss, or Carolyn?
I think I brought up everything that I
No,
had been thinking.
Okay. All right, thank you,
everything sounds good
everyone.
to me too.
Oh, sorry, Carolyn, go ahead.
No, I just said everything sounds good to me too. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's participation. Meeting is adjourned 10:27 a.m. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye. Thanks.